Hey, Jason?
Is it on?
He probably falls asleep without Jason. Should be on, Judy.
And even
Yeah.
at the podium? Okay. Good evening, residents and viewers at home, or residents at home. I want to call our meeting for the Village of Broadview at the Finance Committee meeting for February 12th, 2020, and the time is 7:44. Okay. First of all, I'd like to apologize. I'm sorry about being late. I was coming from the downtown city and obviously traffic in this weather, so I totally apologize. I didn't want to inconvenience anyone, so I'm sorry about that. I will start now with our roll call. I'm Trustee Judy Abraham. I'm the Finance Chairman for the Village of Broadview.
Trustee John Tierney.
Trustee Andrea Senior.
Timothy Hicks, Finance Director.
Tom Hood, Budget Officer.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to take a moment of silence at this time, please. Okay, thank you, everyone. On our agenda tonight, we're going to make an adjustment where it says public comment. I'd like to do that at the end. My fellow trustees, is that okay with you?
Yes.
All right, so that we can get through each presentation, because we have different individuals here. So what I'll do is I'll have them stand and say who they are at this time. We have our village attorney here.
Hi, I'm James Vaselli, V-A-S-S-E-L-L-I.
Thank you. I have Miss Letitia Jones, who handles all our finance and our office, so if she can please stand and Letitia's here. We have Director Matt Ames from our Public Works Department in attendance here as well. Mr. Matt Ames, thank you for attending. I have the village clerk here as well, Mr. Kevin McGreer. Thank you. And I also, as I said before, we've invited Mayor Thompson so that she can make her presentation about the village finances. Thank you for being here. Okay. The first item on the agenda is our overview of the fiscal year 19 financial results.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'll hit the highlights on some of the major funds. We're still underway with the audit. We anticipate wrapping up very soon. So we look at revenues and expenditures for the general fund. These are again, unaudited numbers. We should have the final audit in a few weeks here. But for the general fund, we had revenues of $14,391,919 versus expenses of $14,902,169 for a net income before transfers of net income or loss of about $500,000, which I believe is where we expected. We did budget transfers into the general fund, so I think that number is in line, but again, these are unaudited numbers. The garbage fund had revenues of $690,846 versus expenditures of $630,537 for a net income of approximately $60,000. The motor fuel tax fund had revenues of about $200,000, and as of didn't have any expenditures, but I believe we probably will post some adjustments there to that fund. The CDBG fund didn't have any revenues, but expenditures of about $40,000. The Roosevelt TIF had revenues of $385,000 versus expenses of $409,000 for a net loss of about approximately $23,000. The 22nd and 17th TIF. That TIF is really winding down, so what we're seeing now is just basically interest of about $360 versus expenses of about $440, which is probably just banking charges. Another TIF that is close to winding down is the 27th Avenue and 23rd TIF. Had revenues of about $93,000 versus expenditures of about $100 for a net income of $93,000. The 17th Avenue TIF North had revenues of $300,000 versus expenses of $348,000 for a net loss for about $47,000 or $48,000. The 19th Street TIF had revenues of $128,000 versus expenses of $125,000 for a net income of about $3,100. Capital Projects Fund had revenues of $12.2 million, expenses of $11 million for a net income of $1.2 million. The Water and Sewage Fund had revenues of approximately $3.6 million versus expenditures of $3.8 for a net loss before transfers of about $214,000. So the total revenues for all of the major funds is about $34 million versus expenses of about $33 million for a net income before transfers about $675,000. So this covers all of our major funds. So looks, and again, these are the numbers, these are net income loss before transfers. We budget to transfer money into certain funds like the debt service and money into the general fund from other funds. So this doesn't take that into consideration. So, any questions at this time?
Trustee Tierney, do you have a
What-
question?
Yeah, if we had a copy of that, I'd like to go over it. The capital funds, capital improvement funds, that's, I think, I don't know if I got the numbers right, it was 11 million?
Yeah, so we spent about 11 million out of the capital fund.
Okay. And what's the status of that now? And as far as money?
In terms of,
Where is it? You spent 11 million. Where are we? Positive, negative?
yeah, so we got in about 12.2.
Okay.
So, you know, again, before transfer, because some of those funds probably would come into the general fund, depending on what expenses were paid out of the general fund that need to be reimbursed. But right now, we're looking at a surplus in that fund about $1.2 million.
Okay. That's the only question I had right now.
Okay.
Trustee Senor? None? Okay. Let me ask you this, Director X, did you have this for additional to be available to the rest of the trustees who aren't here? Can we get it in their boxes, or is it something we sent out via email for them? Because I know.
No, we did not send it out via email. We can, if that's what you would like.
Yeah, I just want to make sure the other trustees that aren't here in attendance and, you know, that they're, and if they don't get a chance to watch it.
Yeah, we'll
as
pass it
well.
along
Is
to the
it-
clerk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is it possible? Do you mind? Okay, I
Not at all,
appreciate that.
not at all.
Okay.
I have a question
Sure, go ahead.
for Tim, if we're going to, or Tom, regarding revenues, particularly into the taxes. How much taxes have we collected? I know we're just starting to get them. So where are we with that level, percentage-wise, of what we need to collect?
For fiscal 20 or for the?
Yeah, for 20.
Okay. Well, that's the next topic.
Oh, that's the
No,
next
that's
topic.
not-
Do you want to
okay.
hold on for
All
that
right.
one?
All right.
Yeah, because you just,
Other questions regarding where we anticipate fiscal 19 coming in at?
Yeah.
are we all good? Tom, did you want to add anything?
No, I
We're
think he
good?
covered it.
You got it all covered? Okay. Yeah, if you could, like I said, just if you can get a copy of this sheet and just put it in their box, go from there. So appreciate that. Okay. Since there's no further questions on the overview of the fiscal year 19 financial results, we're going to move on to our year-to-date fiscal year 20 projections and expectations.
Okay, so, right now through, for January, so I'll just briefly go through. So we've collected about, $8.9 million in revenue, versus expenses of about, $9.3 million. So for a net deficit, through January of about 400,000. So when we look at where we would anticipate being at this point versus the budget, so the key driver is property taxes because we haven't received those the disbursements. So when you think about I think the second installments are usually payable in December. Those disbursements do not make it out to the municipalities until February or March. So that's when we would anticipate seeing probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but that's when we would expect to see the next large disbursement. Because this month we got about almost $1 million in taxes. Where year to date we only have about $1 million.
Okay.
And just flatline the budget, we would expect it to be at about $3.5 million, right? So that's where the discrepancy really is, and it's all timing. You have, it's purely timing, right? We levy the taxes, they're collected. The two things we can count on in life is taxes and death, right?
Correct.
So
Pretty much.
we can definitely anticipate that the property tax revenue will come in as expected.
Okay.
From other, so when we look at other taxes, and that's video gaming taxes and the utility taxes and things like that, that's going like gangbusters. We have about $4.8 million in revenue so far this year, which is, and again, that's.
And that was from, excuse me, gaming, you said? And
So it's
utilities?
gaming, utilities.
Sales.
Sales
Sales
tax.
tax is a big one.
So there's a lot in the pool, right? Is that what you're saying? There's a lot of entities applying into this 4.8 million?
Right, so there's a
Okay.
bunch of different categories that
There you
all
go.
go into there. But I just mentioned gaming because that's one of our newest revenue sources that's really starting to pick up steam. When you think sales taxes is an indication of the health of the businesses in the community. So those things are continually being strong. So that's the revenue that we would need to grow, because your property taxes, you're capped, based on what the community and
What's levied? Is that what they call it?
yeah, so, no, so the market value of homes and
Okay.
things like that, so, but property, but the other taxes are use taxes, so the more people, buy, merchandise in the village, then the more sales tax we get and things like that, so, that's where Dave and the mayor comes into play in terms of their ability to draw businesses into, because that number is going to be able to grow exponentially versus property taxes, right? We don't have, with the village being landlocked, there's not an opportunity to, build new houses or things like that. So, and then even with that, it takes a while for those to get onto row. So. So when we talk about expenditures, that's all timing, that really never goes on a straight line basis. And, pretty much when you look at year to date, the two departments that or one department at this point, that's a little over budget versus year to date, which is all on the flat line. We're probably $600,000 ahead of schedule for through January. So, but we anticipate that all of everything will come in line with what we anticipate, because we haven't seen any unexpected repair costs, unexpected things that any weather events. We haven't one today, but we haven't had much in that. Those are some of the expenditures that are beyond our control. The more it snow, the more we need to salt and things like that. So when those things don't happen, you're able to be favorable. So anything you want to add, Tom, about where we anticipate to be for fiscal 20?
From a cash standpoint, we've spent a lot of the money already. When the property taxes roll in, we should be in a good cash position to start next year. So that's important, because this is a cycle that repeats itself. The taxes are going to come at certain times of the year, where the other taxes are kind of spread out to help us get between the two big tax payments times. But most of our expenses are monthly. So having the cash on hand to meet the required expenses each month is important, and starting with a good cash balance is important, and that looks like where we're going to be.
So we're in a very healthy
Yeah, I think, the one thing that we definitely have to tip our hats to is the departments, right? When you think about the amount of revenue that they're able to, or not revenue, but the amount of expenses that they're able to cover because of their ability to go out and get grants. I believe at the last meeting, the chief talked about, Chief Hugling talked about him being able to cover the cost of, the radios that's going into?
radios.
Yeah, so and then because he was able to obtain that grant, now he's able to kind of reallocate those funds that he expected to spend on radios for the new, for the squad cars. And then, so now he's leveraging those grant dollars to be able to buy something else. Chief Kenny does that a lot as well. And so what you're able to do is stretch those dollars that have been committed, because now you're getting funding that wasn't necessarily counted on, that we didn't budget for, right? So now we're covering expenses via someone else's money, right? It's always better to spend someone else's money. And then because we're able to cover those expenses, now we can spend funds on something else. And I think even in Matt's department, that we see that a lot. When you see with Public Works, with the ability to leverage dollars, now we're able to get bigger projects because we're leveraging the dollars that we are putting forth through grants, and those are being matched, or even we just have to put up a small portion of it, and then the projects that we're able to, the coverage that we get is just exponential versus had we not been in that position. And I think that's, and then coming back to Tom, managing cash flows so that we can make sure that, because the one thing that everyone has to realize is that there's always money out there to be had, but you have to, as the saying goes, you have to spend money to make money. And so with the grants, if you don't have the ability to put up your portion, then you can't get the other 80%, right? And so the fact that we've put ourselves in a good cash flow position to be able to leverage a lot of the grants that are out there, then they come looking for us, right? Because they know that, hey, Broadview, they can make it happen. They can, they can leverage their dollars to get more done. So I think that's a great testament. I mean, if we look back over the history of the amount of grants that have been obtained over this of Mayor Thompson's administration versus prior administrations, it has to be double or triple, if not more, because of the investments that were being made with a grant writer, the departments being strategically focused on trying to leverage the dollars and stretch the dollars that we do get.
Very well said. So our cash flow, I like that. We're in a good shape. Definitely good shape since you've been taking over in the last 2 years. Then you've noticed that change and that progression, just because we're just doing different things
Yeah.
internally as well.
Yeah, I think we're just more strategically focused. So you look
Okay,
at
I like
this,
that.
this building is a perfect example of that. Before the prior administration, they would just focus on patching this building, right? And at huge chunks, because like when the AC went out, that was like $500,000, right? Everything, because it was just breaking down, it was huge cost to replace them, or the repairs was just, and so when we looked at it, it's like if these things keep breaking down or keep needing to be repaired or replaced, you look at, it just keeps adding up to where the village would have been in a very, very vulnerable position, because you don't have $500,000 just sitting somewhere waiting for something to break, right? So, and so we'll get to that, but that's the same type of concept that when we looked at for the IEPA loan, right? The village is spending, anywhere from $6 to $7 million on water main breaks approximately a year. So the mindset is let's change that and start to, if we could spend that amount of money on replacing and strategically replacing the water mains, then over time we would have gotten all of the whole village done, right? Over a 10-year span or a 15-year span, instead of being reactionary or to what's happening, we go out and we proactively know where the problems are. We just need to address them.
Any other?
You touched on the property tax, Tim. Where are we staying with the property
Yeah.
tax? What percentage are we paying? Is it going up? Is it going,
What'd you
I
say?
know it won't go down, but property tax.
Okay.
We're capped. Where's that cap at? What percentage?
I don't
4
know.
point something, or is it 5?
Well, it's, actually, when we talk about property taxes, it's not really a percentage. Basically, it's the assessed valuation. The percentage ends up, is the fill number at the end. So where we're at, it's just, it's increasing each year by CPI, the assessed valuation. But as things change, that percentage, the related percentage can go up or down based upon the overall assessment of all the property in town.
Yeah, and then the other thing that plays a key part to that is, what new things have come into town, right? So you get more, the industrial park filled, or you get, they make large improvements to the businesses that they do go in and lease or buy in those industrial parks. Now you're increasing the assessed value, which is the total value, which you're capped, like Tom said, basically by CPI. But when you grow the pie, you know what I'm saying? So if our assessed value is just for numbers' sakes is about 100 million, but if we grow that 100 million to 200 million or 150 million, now the tax base is a lot larger. So that's the real key, because if not, it's still going to be it'll be flat.
So like vacancies, companies moving
Yeah,
out,
things like
businesses
that.
being vacant, obviously brings the value down, right, that we're gonna be.
Correct. The assessed valuation will fall drastically on an empty lot.
On an empty one, so it's a drastic drop.
Right, it's a drastic drop.
Okay, then when it's, okay. So obviously, like you said, our strategy is to be proactive, continue to have relationships so these companies stay here, obviously
Or
keep
even
it
if they're not going
filled.
to stay, that they,
There's a new client.
that they've made their building attractive
That's
enough
it.
for someone else to want.
Exactly.
And I think we've seen that with Bosch. Even though they're leaving, their facilities and Broadview is so attractive, now they have a bidding war on their facilities, right? So those are the type things. And then, you know,
Like Vanny Foods doing the expansion, if they further expand and buy a property.
you grow the pie, and so that's what, because you know that's really what has to happen in terms of for the village, right? So you want to be attractive for other businesses to come in, other residents to come in. I think we looking at it holistically. When you know the mayor's going to speak, I don't want to steal any of her thunder, but from the standpoint of you make the schools more attractive, right? So her involvement with the schools and strengthening the schools and understanding and making sure that they have all the resources that they need, so that that's the best school available, and people will really want to be a part of those schools. And then the same thing with the amenities, right? So the library, you know, having a state-of-the-art library that that people can see themselves taking their kids to, right? The parks, you know, making sure that the parks offer all the things that residents would want to see in a village that they would want to live in, right? So all of those things come into play, and then and I think that's really where you know, kudos to the mayor and her administration is making sure that we're collaborating and making sure the library gets through their issues, making sure the park district is getting whatever resources they need, things like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Andrea, any questions?
The only thing I was wondering about, he was saying something about the disbursements, and I was wondering like how many disbursements, like that's like payout, right?
Mhm.
That they do.
Can you speak up? It's hard to hear, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
You got
So
the
I-
Yes, you don't have property
Like-
taxes.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. So yeah, so you had mentioned disbursements. The first one is, did you say that was gonna be in February?
No, so the second installment is usually due in December,
Okay.
right? From a property tax owner, like when you get your bill, it's usually due in December, and so we'll get disbursements from Cook County, from the treasurer's office, from that collection that was due in December. That probably will hit municipalities and villages like ourselves in probably February or March, right? So that's when we get a huge influx of cash from those second installment tax bills.
Okay.
Is that your question? Then what about like if there's vacant houses? Do we, obviously we're not getting anything for them, right? That they're sitting vacant as far as property tax?
Somebody still have to pay the
Oh,
property
yeah,
taxes.
somebody's gonna pay the property taxes
Yes,
eventually.
Yeah.
So we do,
Whoever's-
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So the where that comes into
Or
play.
even an apartment building that's vacant, there has to be some type of tax paid, correct? So we do get
Because somebody
some
still
type-
owns it.
Gotcha,
right?
okay, so make sure.
Yeah, so where that comes into play is just growing the total assessed value, right? So if you have a lot of vacancies, you have a lot of abandoned buildings and things like that, or you have units or spaces in the industrial that are not rented, you know, then your assessed value is not going to grow. And so that means that, you know, the amount that we can assess is going to be less because the assessed value that we can levy is lower because of those factors.
So those are all part of the effects then? We have
Yes.
vacant corporations that are moving out, just in case, or any homes. So that's be a big effect. Now, do you guys monitor that? Do we have a tracking way of knowing like where it's at, so? Or is it varies, it just varies year to year, I mean?
Yeah,
there's
so
no-
there's a turnover, right?
Right.
But we don't monitor it because it's not, there hasn't been any significant changes, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, if we were monitoring it, it would be the state of the union sort of would be bad, right? Because now we really need to pay attention to it, because now that's gonna affect the budget, that's gonna affect a whole lot of things, right? But the way it is now, the assessed value has been either stable or growing, right? So, you know, it's nothing for us to dive into to see, because it's not declining.
That's
right?
what-
So if it was declining, then that's something we would definitely wanna,
Address.
you know, keep an eye on to see, okay. But that would have been something that we would have known about ahead of time, because for it to decline, that means that somebody left major and there's no replacement for it.
Okay.
So Home Depot and Target walked away from the village, right? Several key businesses in the industrial park walked away from Broadview, and there was no replacement for them, right? So, but, I mean, the way this administration is, we would, the mayor and her team would known about that way before that actually happened, right? So again, we would have been strategic to make sure that, you know, that, hey, if you don't have a plan in place, then let us help you put one in place, because you don't want to react to Target being gone after Target is gone.
Right.
You want to react to Target saying they're going to leave to make sure that Walmart comes in right after them, right? Or Lowe's or somebody else, right? So, but, you know, from that standpoint, we haven't monitored it because if we are, then Lord help us. Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other questions from anybody, so we move on to the next item? Okay, are we ready for the next item, my finance
Yeah.
team? It says review of projects completed and in progress. Who's going to be addressing that?
Well, it's mainly more so in progress. So one of the things that we are undertaking is the village administrator, Tom, and myself evaluated the banking services. We went from MB, who was acquired by Fifth Third, and the level of service that was provided by MB was just horrible, right? When walked in, the administration, the relationship manager had never been to Broadview to access, so that had never even happened. So, and then once we were able to get some things out of MB Financial, but their level of service just was not up to par to what you would expect from a Chase or a Bank of America or a Harris Bank. And so we were monitoring it from that standpoint to make a decision to move forward, maybe with another bank at anyway. Fifth Third comes in, acquires MB Financial, and the services were even worse. There's things that just that they either didn't offer, or they didn't take into consideration, or that they just completely dropped the ball on. And all the while, there's always been other banking institutions that wanted to establish banking relationships with the village, and Chase being one of those. And they met with the mayor, they met with me, they met with Tom and Tisa, just to see what things that how they could help the village, not in any way, shape, or fashion contingent upon them winning the business of the village, but over time and evaluating them versus other financial institutions, we just feel at this point the pricing that they'll be able to offer, the products and services that they'll be able to offer, that's something that we definitely want to recommend to this committee that we move forward with.
With them, with Chase?
Yeah.
Okay. So you feel comfortable with them?
Yes, we definitely do. I think, I don't want to speak for the mayor, but I know they've definitely laid out their commitment to the village, not only on a transactional basis, of winning the banking services, but being, you know,
More
being a part of that.
partnership
Yeah, being a
to the
partnership with the community and some of the initiatives that, that she has.
Okay. And you made mention, my village administrator, Miss Leticia Jones, did you want to comment or add on to what he was talking about, to making the change?
No, like Director Hicks said, is that the finance committee, our team, we met and we also gave our suggestions to the mayor when we were looking at the banking. And when we did sit down with Chase Bank of the needs, not only in the village of Broadview, but also as a community base, where they came out in order to show us more than just financial what they can do for us, what they can do for the community. And that was the biggest piece that caught our attention.
So that was, so they want to be more inclusive with the entire community, and then they're going to meet what your needs are on the administrative side, because obviously you always have an intake. Okay. Anybody have any questions for our village administrator? You're happy with it, so thumbs up from you. So that's good. Any questions for that?
No, I
We're
don't.
good on that one? On that one? Any other in-progress projects?
I think besides the conversion from gallons, what do we go,
Water.
from meters to gallons, I think that is going well. And I think, you know, that, again, that's a testament to the village administrator. She did a great job, and also Public Works and the Water Department. And then that was definitely a, you know,
Smooth transition?
yeah, it went better than expected. So, and I think when we talk about other completed, you know, adding the water meters is another project that is, you know, probably 99% complete. And another aspect of, you know, we get into the IEPA loan, but another strategic decision that moves the village forward, and being able to leverage the information that we're getting so that we can make better informed decisions. And I think that was definitely a great thing that took place, that's, you know, definitely completed. From a, yeah, so that's probably the biggest thing in terms of in progress, because when we look at the banking services, you know, we will open up several new accounts to be able to properly segregate funds. You know, that will be make it easier for us to reconcile accounts. You know, right now we have a lot of things flowing through the general fund, the general account, and there should be several things broken out to be able to isolate the activity. We should have you know, a payroll account, an accounts payable account. That's where the funds would, so those transactions would be strictly that. We're getting so many grants that we should have a grant account, so that the funds coming in and out, we can quickly identify the grant funds.
Monitoring?
Yeah. And then just, that's going to be a huge project to transition over from one bank to another. But, you know, having been through this with Chase at, you know, with the city of Chicago and other places, they make it seamless. You know, they assign a team, they put out a project plan, a timeline, and then they make it as seamless as possible. So we don't anticipate any issues.
Now, will that come in front of our board for us to make the recommendation then to the mayor to go ahead, or are we doing a certain, or is it just gonna show up on one of our agendas? Is it gonna be
No,
presented that way, or?
I would ask that you make the recommendation to the board that that's some of the things that we should move forward with.
And you want that when tonight, or do you want that at another meeting?
No, that you would make the recommendation to the broader board.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, to come out of this meeting, that's one of the projects you feel like we should move forward with.
Yeah, I mean, how do you guys feel about that, that we could,
Yeah, I think we can talk about it.
okay. All right, so you got the consensus from us, we're all good with it. All right, all good on the completed projects and in progress? Anything else you wanted to cover on that?
No.
Before I move on to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next item is the IEPA loan application update.
Yes. So The IEPA loan, I think this went back as far as Matt, Mr. Ames, Director Ames. I remember Matt went to DC and came back with the information about the IEPA loan. And how long ago was that, Matt? Do you
wanna bring
remember?
him up here? Director Ames, can you come up to the front, please? And if you want to speak at the mic, because obviously there's going to be possible Q&A from us. Yeah, probably questions from us, so we'll have you ready. And then you can speak. I appreciate you coming, sir. Thank you, Director Ames.
Not a problem. I don't have any notes with me, so I'll try and remember
right.
what I can remember.
That's fine.
But I'm just trying to remember the first time that you mentioned this to,
The IPA loan?
Yeah, do you want to give us some
It's-
history so you can catch everybody up to speed and just give a bullet point?
Yeah. Briefly, knowing that we had capital needs, capital improvement needs, mainly geared around water distribution improvements. And we were trying to figure out a way to finance the capital needs without exhausting an already anemic water fund, which was anemic because water rates increases that were passed through by the city of Chicago to its suburban customers approximately 7 years ago, about the time we built the new pump station there. And then both mayors, Sam Puglia and then Mayor Sherman Jones, knew about the rate increase. But we failed on the Broadview side to act on the rate increase for a few reasons. My knowledge. One was, at the time, let me say that I've been here through 5 finance directors. I believe, Tim, you make the 6th. We had the interim John Perenunzi, Jan Baptist for a while, and we had Greg Peters. We had some
Wintowski.
guy getting right.
Lee
I'm sorry?
Lee Swintek.
Well, no, Les Swintek
Les
was, I said,
Well,
in
you
my
before
team.
that? Okay.
Right. As a matter of fact, when we came in, Les Swintek was operating the village's finances with 3 personal computers. But again, that's neither here nor there. I'm just talking about the reason why the pass-through rate increase didn't happen, at least at the time Chicago imposed it. Jan Baptist resigned her post here in the village of Broadview, and the 3 interim directors from human HR, the resource company, and some others just didn't have a handheld on what the finances was at the time.
Right.
So what we did was we literally had to stop and pause because there was no financial history being offered for the strategic planning and how to address this. So you're right. It wasn't DC, but it was Springfield.
Okay.
That we learned about the low-interest IEPA loan and how we could address our capital needs. The issue then became the application, obviously the facility planning, and you guys voted on it. You know, we bought it. That was one of the first main agenda items, I believe, that Mayor Thompson and the administration was trying to address. And that is take advantage of the IEPA loan. So the first thing that had to happen was a facility plan. So you guys approved, meaning the board, approved the facility plan to be produced by Hancock Engineering. It requires technical information, technical data that, again, they are the gatekeepers or the bookkeepers for all of our benchmark information that's required for this application.
So when did that initially happen? Do you remember?
What's that?
The facility plan.
The facility plans? It was approved by the board. I mean, we've got agenda minutes, and that would be easy enough to to backtrack into, but it was approved by the board, the facility plan, within the last year or two.
Okay. Just trying to give the audience a.
Well, yeah, that's with this current administration. I mean, with the current board, the facility plan was approved. That's
During
why,
that time.
for me, I gotta be honest with you, I didn't understand
You were on it?
some of the back and forth for
Madam
that agenda item, so.
Mr. Commissioner,
Neither
Madam
do we.
Chair, I believe it was about May the 20th. I'm not exactly sure, but May the 20th, 2019. I'm not sure. Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, because I know we want to, I want to make sure
Yeah.
everybody that it was during
Right.
this term. All right, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Director Ames, we got it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that was a key part of getting the loan started, right? That was the key component
For
to
the
even.
application.
To even
For the
apply for the
application,
application, right?
That's right.
So not even the loan process, but just to apply, so, which required, it requires a commitment of about $355,000. And that was unanimously, or no, I think there was one objection
One.
to that.
I think there was. I thought
Was there
was
two
one. Was there
or one?
Just
Just the one?
So that, once, in my estimation, once the board approved that process, knowing that that was the initial step, and prior to that, I believe we, in the Finance Committee meetings, we addressed many conversations and many questions about the actual loan itself before we got to the point of actually committing to the facility plan and application and things like that. So to kind of fast forward, everything, and then everything that has been done for the IEPA loan, which is just the application, right? This is not even being awarded the loan, but the application process is a process that is clearly spelled out, that has clearly been communicated. And so at the last board meeting, what was being presented was just another step of a required step in the application process. So, so now the loan application comes to a screeching halt because the board did not didn't approve. We didn't get enough votes to continue with the process that had been spelled out in the application itself. Just another requirement that needed to, just like the facility plan was the first part of it. This ordinance that was being presented, which was really codifying or putting into public record that the village would commit to pay the loan from just from the water fund, that it would not seek to pay the loan payments from any other fund. And so that was just a required process. And so, again, that legislation and ordinance would be back before the board. And so, again, it's just a requirement for the loan application, which was originally, the commitment by the board was made, almost a year ago to go with this process. So that's where we stand now. So that's really the update. And so, again, this is a part of another strategic decision to proactively manage the village's finances to be able to address some of the biggest capital project needs, continual project needs, because as Matt has probably said a million times, to address the water infrastructure needs all at once would probably be 50 million plus, right? Which, you know, unfortunately, the village is definitely not in a position to do and bite off that all at once. And this was the best alternative to trying to tackle it all at once, to be able to strategically tackle it where it's needed the most initially, and then from there, which is all laid out in the facility plan that that Hancock put together. So that's where we stand, Madam Chair.
Any questions? Trustee Tierney?
Yeah, Matt, you would know, Director Ames, you would know better than anybody. Over the last 10 years, there weren't any increases in water, correct?
No, we
Okay,
didn't
because
pass.
a comment was made that that was not true,
What's that?
that there was water, there was improvements, or there was a
Increase.
cost, an increase in cost, but there
The-
hasn't
the-
been, correct?
There was, I believe, insignificant
Bingo.
water rate increase maybe 6 years ago. Okay, but in terms of keeping up with the 100% Chicago rate increase
That
to
hadn't-
us, we have not addressed
That
that.
hadn't been done.
We had
Okay.
not, so what, the thing that, if I can, Trustee Tierney, that's one of the things that was disturbing to me was a question that was being posed to the finance director, and I think the answer was very, very obvious. And the question was if in fact we are raising the water rates to apply for this EPA loan. And the answer is absolutely not. We're raising the rates, so the rates should have been raised, again, at the same schedule. And I was signing off on the invoice that we received from the water agency for our water purchase today. And it just so happened, and we've been receiving the same invoices for the last 10 years. I've been on the executive board over there since the time I've been the director of public works here. And we've been receiving the same invoice. And on that invoice, it clearly says exactly what we're paying. It tells you, it spells out the water rate increase at the time it's coming down and the justification. Water rate increase to be imposed July 2019 because of Chicago rate increases, so forth and so on. So I thought that was disturbing and misleading and unfortunate. But the water rate increase was something that we should have done long before. But because we did not have the financial director in place to go ahead and, like you said, get the strategic planning and move this forward, we had to sit on it until now. So it's problematic for me, and I'll tell you why, because it affects my department, most certainly operations directly. So we're out, we've had some significant water main breaks, you know, on the lines that we're trying to replace here in the last 90 days. And to sit back and to watch this become fodder for whatever reason is just disappointing and frustrating, to say the least. So.
And the fact that we had 5 or 6 meetings on this, reprogrammed so it will go over to the homes in the village, and so everybody would be aware of what was going on. And then to just throw that out like it never happened, that bothered me too. So thanks for answering
The
that.
facts are the facts. All I can say is,
Yeah.
anytime the narratives don't line up with the facts, then you should probably check the person that's giving the narrative.
Well, I
The
don't wanna
facts
get
are
in-
recorded here.
don't wanna
That's
get
the
into
great thing about
characterization,
everything
but
being.
We did what we were asked to do. We were transparent with what was going on. So, okay, thank you, Director Ames.
Trustee Andrew, any questions for Director Ames?
I'm good.
No, I don't have any questions for Director Ames at all, but thank you for your update on that and your work you've been doing in your department. So obviously, we can keep this moving. Mr. Hood, did you have anything you wanted to comment on? Because I believe a statement was made. I think you had a number about it. Are you good? Okay. All right. Anything else?
No, let's get to this while we're all
Okay.
here, Mayor.
All right, are we all good? Can we go
Yeah.
to the next item on that? So for the IEPA loan, nobody has questions
No.
legally for our village attorney? He's here?
I have
So we-
nothing legally, no.
Okay, good. Thank you. Trustee? None? All right, good.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the 2 trustees who are in attendance here.
Oh, well, thank you. I didn't know if there was going to be any questions about
No,
the
I just
legalities
wanted to
and
think that, yeah.
Yeah.
just like to make sure everything's covered and addressed. All right, next item on the agenda is our Mayor Thompson is going to talk about comments about the financial outlook of the village. I want to thank her for coming and I'm so happy I got to invite her to attend one of our finance meetings and speak out. So you have the floor, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the Finance Committee and the residents that's in attendance tonight. I am pleased to say that we've done a tremendous job over the past 3 years as it relates to being transparent and being accountable to what we were elected to do, and that's to serve in integrity. So a couple of things that have taken place in the finance department that we had put in best practices, and one was bringing on a village administrator, which was actually a very good decision that we could have made because Ms. Jones, she does a lot of the implementation as it relates to policies and procedures and working with the finance team under Director Hicks' leadership. So one thing that was implemented was how we enhanced our cash handling process. The village in the past handled cash transaction manually. And so we made that very, we went into a technology. So we installed smart meters. What was happening was when we collect large amount of cash or checks, the police department was actually escorting either the water person that was in place then down that became the village administrator to the bank to deposit this large amount of cash. And that was inappropriate. You know, if something should happen to them, we looking at maybe possible a fatality in our fight with our police department and or the person handling the cash. So we installed the smart meters. So with the smart meters, that eliminated us to have police escorts cashiers to the bank. We installed the remote check deposit scanners. And so with that eliminated the need for checks to be taken to the bank to be deposited. It increased cash collection since checks were presented to the bank sooner, and it reduced the number of non-sufficient fund checks. So we've seen a reduction in those that write checks. We know right away when the funds are not available, and I can just attest to some of the conversation that the administrator and I have on the number of NSF checks that we do receive. This is very small. Probably on a month, we probably receive probably 5, and they get rectified immediately. So the cash component as it relates to check issues is, has enhanced. We also installed check card readers. So that means in the fire department, the police department, and administration and building, they all have a credit card machine where they can accept credit cards to pay citations or permits that's over at the building department, or tickets that, or alarm invoices that may have over at the fire department. So we made that transition where we have credit card terminals in every department, so every department is able to accept cash, check, or credit cards now. We successfully issued the $12 million bonds, and that's how we're in this new, this renovated facility, new for the police department. And that was a big deal because when we first came in, we assessed, you know, working with the finance team with Mr. Hood and Director Hicks as it relates to what that looked like, and working with our department heads, the fire, police, building, and public works, on what would be the solutions for us to have a facility that made sense, that we can financially support and that we can financially be responsible for. And one of the things that we talked about prior to this administration is being fiscal responsible. So we wanted to make sure that we can maximize our dollars to the full capacity that we can afford and not go into a debt crisis. And so then we have this new facility, and it made sense on how we repay the debt. And we actually have timelines that's, we've been very transparent with that, with the timelines on what that money looked like, on how we budget for it. But then it also gave us an opportunity to look on how we look at strategically for projects. So we're looking at 5-year plans. What can we do in 2020 and 2021, and that includes our debt. And we can budget for those things, and we are smarter to be able to execute a more solid strategic plan moving forward as it relates to the finances. We enhanced our internal controls. And so what that means, every department in the village of Broadview functioned separately. So police did whatever they did, building, public works, fire. What we did is we made internal controls in place. So when at the end of the day, when money is being exchanged or checks, everything has to balance out at the end of the day. And they bring all of those receipts over to administration. Ms. Jones, she goes and she double checks to make sure that the cash that's collected in respective departments outside of Public Works, they don't take payments. But outside of that department, to make sure that we balance it at the end of the day as it relates to the respective department. So that's a key component to how we are fiscal responsible, because now we have some controls in place with policies and procedures on how we operate operations every single day. We improved our budgeting process. So when we got here, the budgeting as a whole was it was siloed. Each department didn't have the input or the say in their respective department. And from our perspective, leadership, when we're working with departments that have a budget that they're responsible for staff and operations, they should have input on how their budget is developed. And so what we, the finance team and Ms. Jones, what we put in place is we put a process in place as we go into the next fiscal year, and we include all of those department heads that impacts their department. And what I found that was so profound, they took ownership of being responsible for their department. Because how do you hold a department head accountable if they can't do basic budgeting? So this is how we hold them accountable. So part of this administration is accountability, and it starts with me, and it starts with the administration team. So now we have a process in place. At the beginning, right after the holidays, Director Hitz put a plan together for him and Tom to go to each department head. They meet individually first because the needs are so different from the different departments. Once they identify where their needs are, then they come back and then they get in a cluster in a room and they have this discussion amongst themselves, because that allows them to negotiate what they can do and what they can go without with each other, instead of it coming from me saying, we're not going to do this, we're going to cut your budget 10%. It should be a collaborative effort when we're talking about a budget that impacts operations. And so they've been doing that. And then we, once they solidify some things and kind of have it laid out, then they meet with the finance chair. And then she's included in that conversation where they make a recommendation to then I get in, and then when she meets, then I get engaged, and then I meet with the department heads in the finance team. And for us to have a zero balance budget in the general fund, we have this conversation before we bring it to the full board to vote on, but it comes through the finance committee before we actually vote on the budget, so that we're very transparent. We are front with how it's articulated by department, and we can get our questions addressed by the board at that time through the finance committee. So we've put some great things in place. We've actually put some capital project planning in place that we're going to be launching real soon on what that looks like for street sidewalks and alleys. It's a 5-year plan. We go, well, maybe not a 5-year plan, but it goes into 2023, the plan. But that helps us strategically put things in place that the residents and the businesses can see where projects are become online. You know, where are we going to be at in this year? So that we kind of upfront where we are with those types of projects and leveraging our grant funds. So when Director Hicks talked about the grant funds, that's been a big deal for us. We work extremely hard to secure grant funding, and it's a lot of late nights and a lot of conversations, and us just having the grants coming online where they actually starting to just reach out to us and say, you know what, Mayor, we have this grant coming online, what do you think? And as soon as I get it, I forward it to the fire chief or the police chief or to Public Works to see if it's going to be advantageous for us to even look into the grant. And sometimes the grants are small. I've seen some as small as $3,000, but we've seen some like some real tangible money for us. And then once they look into the grant and they read the requirements to make sure that we qualify for the funding, then it goes to the finance team, because they are the ones that have to say, especially those that's a matching grant, they have to be the ones to say, can we afford to match this? And what's the timeline, and how do we put it in the plan so that we can either submit our bid to even qualify for it? So the first thing we do is we have the department heads, because that's their roles as leaders, is to vet out the funding. Do we qualify? Can we afford it? And then they transfer that over to the finance team. And what they do is they look at the budget overall to see where our monies are to make sure that we can afford to bring something that's a matcher. So that's how we look at leveraging our grants. We've improved our bond rating. We've created some financial policies, a fund reserve fund balance. We created that policy, and a debt management policy that we have in place. And that was something that the board approved for as being a fiscal responsible village, is putting those two policies in place, because now we at the point where now that we have strategic plans in place, we know what projects should be coming online, we're looking at our funding opportunities, and so now we have a reserve to where we can start actually saving some money so that we can do more with less. And so it's just a lot of work. It's a work in progress, but as we move forward, we want to continue that transparency with the public. And that's with our business partners and our residents and those that come and visit us every single day. We want to just be upfront of where we are with things. And a lot of ways that we communicate that is through our quarterly newsletter. So in the winter newsletter, many residents didn't get it, but we did talk about the IEPA loan in the newsletter. That was in there talking it, and it was on the mayor's message, and then it was reiterated in the finance director report for that. And so we've been talking about this for some time, and as I reflect on the conversation that took place about the water mains that we needed to replace, this is something that we knew that needed to be addressed. We talked about the alleys and the replacement of the water mains that's under those alleys, and it didn't make sense for us to replace the alleys, and we knew we had aging infrastructure that needed to be replaced. And with the board, we've had several meetings that got approved. We actually even had, and I'm trying to get to the memo, because I want to focus on this memo that was presented, not just to my office, but to the Board of Trustees. And this was back in on February 12, 2019. The memo went out to the Board of Trustees and myself, and it talked about the design engineer for the IEPA loan interest, which high priority water main. And in this document, the memo that I have that's dated February 12, 2019, it talks about the breakdown in the budgetary costs. So at the last board meeting, I was quite disappointed in the conversation that took place because they had the information. And when you go back and look at the video from that board meeting, they had no comments. When I went around to say, do you have a comment? Not one trustee had a comment, not one. And that's very disappointing, because what happens is we revert to the way it used to be. And we want to move the village forward, and we cannot move this village forward with that mindset to try to do something that, because they don't read the information or they don't recall the information that's been given to them. And I think it does a disservice to the members of the board that do want to serve in a capacity at a high level. This is high-level leadership, high-level leadership. And we have to be able to articulate these conversations in a professional way. We have to look at the information, and we have to read the information that's provided to us. So at the last board meeting, it was clear to me that several members of the board don't read the information that's given to them. They don't recall what they vote on, and that's just unacceptable, and that's not having accountability. This board is about accountability and transparency. So we do have the information. The information is public for anybody that want to go see it, but I do want to commend Director Hicks and Tom Hood on the extraordinary job that they're doing in the finance department. They are thinking outside of the box. They are working with the department heads to have them think outside of the box. And sometimes I know it can be challenging, because sometimes department heads are told no, and then they come to me trying to get me to say yes to, but you know, it's a conversation, but this is leadership, and it's about accountability. Tom is an expert, and when I say an expert at the cash flow, he digests the information, and that's way beyond my scope of accounting. But I trust him to do well by this village, because he dissects it. He asks 1,000 questions. He talks to Department of Revenue on a regular basis on when we're not receiving our funding, like our property taxes with Cook County. He's on the phone. He actually go downtown to handle the business of Broadview to get things done because of the cash flow that we have to. So I commend him for that. But I also commend the director in the finance department because he's super intelligent. It's not just the finance, he looks at the overall picture, like how we grow economically, how do we include our schools and our park districts and our library, and he gives us those provocative thoughts to make us think outside the box. So when we talk about our other taxing bodies, it's important that we always keep that focus that they are part of our fiscal responsibility. And that means partnerships and collaborations with the parks, with our local schools, and with the library. You know, we all, and they should be able to manage the taxing bodies at that level of leadership, but it all falls back on the leadership of the village on how we collaborate to extend services. And I'm gonna give you an example. The Broadview Public Library. They have a building that's still not open, no accountability, and no transparency. But we here at the village get all of those hits. What's going on, what's going on? I remember building this building and it was told, we want to see the records, we want to see, but the same conversation don't take place at the Broadview Public Library. But the good news is I have the mindset to say, you know what, we still gonna work with the Broadview Public Library because they're part of this community. Regardless of how we feel about them and what they've done, but the accountability don't change because you're in a different setting. It should be the same accountability. So sometimes it's very frustrating to hear the hypocrites talk about what we're doing on this board, but they don't hold the same standards to the same boards. And that has to stop. And so with the library, Director Hester, we have a good working relationship. And she got some amazing thoughts that bring services to our village. And one of them is selling yard stickers or vehicle stickers when we're closed on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock or Saturday service. That's partnerships and collaboration. That's what we should be focusing on. But we also need to focus on the reality of accountability. And if I'm gonna be held to a certain standard, I hope everybody that hold me to the standard hold every elected official to the same standard, period. As it relates to the park district, they do a lot of community events, and we go to them. And they come and we work together on how we can extend our services. So when we talk about community events, it shouldn't just be the park district doing events by themselves. A lot of things we can collaborate on, like they do music in the park. That's gonna be a collaboration with the village and the park district. And now we're saving our resources because we're maximizing and we're stretching our dollars to do a little bit more. So it's just not on the backs of the village and it's not just on the back of the park district. The schools. I don't know if many of you all know, but we have 6 school districts. We have kids in District 88, 89, 94, 92, 208, and 209. We are a unique community. And that requires me to be a lot of different places because I think it's important for our children to see leadership in their school where they live. And so District 94, which is the Camargue School District, they're getting ready to entertain a referendum. And I'm not for it and I'm not against it. But I support the cause that they need to do something immediately to get that school up to code. They have children in wheelchairs that takes them 13 minutes to get to a learning opportunity, to a classroom. That's unacceptable. And I don't know if the student is a North Riverside resident or a Broadview resident, but at the end of the day, it's a child and their education is being interrupted because the school is not in compliance with ADA compliant. And so what I've done for District 94 and Dr. Gannon is I met with Representative Ford, who's the rep for that school district, and Senator Leifer, who's the senator. But I've also had conference calls with Senator Duckworth's office on how we can get federal dollars to help that school get some funding to get them up into compliance with construction because they serve military families, and I don't know if many of you all know that. But these are the things that we do to make us wholesome in Broadview. And this is why I love Broadview, because we have so many unique situations to give people opportunities to be good, to be strong, and to know that they got somebody fighting on their behalf. So when I have to fight with our elected officials about stuff that they didn't read, it's very frustrating for me. It is. So, and lastly, I'm going to leave with this. We've restored residents' trust in the finance department where we didn't have that. We've had several finance directors that were part-time. Keep in mind, they were part-time and wasn't getting the job done. Director Hicks is part-time, but he's getting the job done. He's here late at night. He comes on the weekends. He answers our calls. We have conversations regularly throughout the day. He's available to us. And by being informed and knowledgeable and accessible and transparent, that's what's going to carry this village to the next level, and that's where we're going. We're going to the next level. We can't focus on what took place, what should have took place, or the past, but we got to focus on how we get to the next level. I'm happy to work with all of the department heads. I think they are just excellent and very skilled at their particular in their particular departments. I mean, Director Ames is super intelligent. He can articulate things and move things rapidly. When it comes to the fire department, the chief, she thinks outside the box. It's not just about the fire department. She talks about how you inspire kids to be firemen, how you inspire young girls to, work in a male-dominant role, to go out to different communities and be speakers and those types of things. Commissioner Upshaw in the building department, he thinks outside the box when we're talking about economic development and how we get the blighted commercial businesses back online and having those conversations at the county level. When you talk about your police chief, Kevin Ugley, oh my God, this guy is got so much wisdom and input. When cannabis came online, he took the charge to say, we'll be the first department to educate our community, but just not Broadview, the township, on education on cannabis. That's a big deal because that's something new to us, that they are actually going to training, looking at cannabis shops, going to cultivation shops to get to understanding and the terminology that they need, that they can be experts in the field. Those are the type of leaders that we have in the village of Broadview. They are well-rounded. Letisa, I just can't say enough about her, just how many different ways, how she negotiates our union contracts on behalf of the village to make sure that not only they being treated fair, but we're getting treated fair as residents when we look at these contracts. She works across the lines on a lot of different initiatives. And the big deal for us, we didn't even have an employee handbook. That was her that came to say we need to have an employee handbook so that we can have accountability. And in that handbook, it holds union employees accountable just as well as those that's non-union. So those are the skill sets that we have. And then our clerk office was dysfunctional at some point. And so when Clerk McGreer decided that he wanted to be a part of this leadership team, the first thing he did was make sure all of our ordinance was codified and up to date so that anybody that wanted to see anything that had been passed that had been approved by the board in the past, that they can go online and get that information today. And his office is up to date. He's very transparent. He's on point with his FOIA requests. And not only that, I asked him to take the task of running our census. And he said no problem, and he's doing a phenomenal job going to the churches to talk about census because we have residents in those faith-based organizations. He's going to other communities and he's bringing resources back to Broadview on how we can look at things and tweak some things. He gave us input on our website, just different things. What we have in Broadview is unique when you look at the other towns and what they have. So as we move forward, if I'm gonna be held accountable, everybody that I legislate with is gonna be held accountable. If we're going to be held accountable in the village of Broadview, I hope you hold the other taxing bodies to the same standard that you hold this village board to. So that's all I have, Madam Chair. I'll address any questions that the committee may have.
Oh, thank you very much. That was an unbelievable speech, and it covered everything, and I appreciate you doing that. I know we had the discussion about what I was looking for. So our finance committee as well as our residents, to give you more of an opportunity to speak outside a board meeting where it's more of an agenda based, where here you can come and say what's actually going on behind the scenes and giving everybody an update what changes have taken place for the better and where we are going for the future. So Trustee Tierney, do you have any comments from the mayor?
Well, I think it's safe to say I could probably tell you I work with more village managers and clerks and anybody in this room. And without doubt, I think this management team is more responsive to anybody on this board.
Yeah.
All you have to do is call them, ask them for the information, and usually you don't expect it within that day, but usually within a couple hours, I've got the information I need. So if somebody said they don't have the information, they're just not looking for it. Right. But good job. I'm glad to be working with all of you.
Thank you.
Trustee Andrea?
That was an awesome speech. I think you covered everything from A through Z.
Thank you.
And then some.
And then some. Yes.
And again, I think everything that she's put in place, I think we have to respect with our village administrator Miss Letisa Jones. I know she didn't want to sit up here, but she's always invited to, because she's part of this team, and she's been obviously an asset to your administration, Mayor, and just the changes that have taken place and the improvements. So, I mean, I'm glad that we have her, because now, you know, that, like you say, there's a bond of trust, the community feels comfortable, there's measures being done now so that, you know, when our residents come, or even people that come to visit, you know, there's a whole different atmosphere when you walk into this building now, and it's truly appreciated, and I like the things she's making changes. I'm glad she's part of our finance team, so, and I enjoy the team itself, because they're all doing a great job. I mean, it's just the openness, and that's what I'm saying. I think the thing that upsets me most is when you have some of my fellow trustees that, you know, aren't prepared, and I think that's, you know, a disservice to our community, because again, you know, like the mayor said, we are held accountable. We should be able to answer questions. We should be able to read the information or be able to get the information, because these people are accessible. So I don't understand sometimes when some things come up at a board meeting, and I'm sure some of my fellow trustees sitting here tonight feel the same way, that, you know, we're doing things that got to move the village forward, and there's always a step that we have to do, you know, and I mean, I just think some of our trustees, maybe this ain't for them. Maybe they need to reconsider, you know, how to serve, because we're servants first. So, and I think they need to be more respectful to their fellow trustees up here, as well as the department heads. Our department heads bring a lot of good things to the table, and they're experienced, they're knowledgeable, and I don't think they get the respect from some of our, you know, like I said, I feel bad for some of my fellow trustees that just, the relationships aren't there, and I don't know why, and they should be. The mayor's door is always open. Her phone is available. I mean, we can ask anything, so I don't want to go too far into it, but, you know, hopefully we can move forward from this and learn by it. Gentlemen, anything you have to add on to what the mayor said? She covered everything? Lost it all?
All right, thank
I
you,
also want to give a
trustee.
shout out to our village attorney for showing up. You know, for him to come, just in case we had any legal questions. That's the reason I asked him to come with this IPA loan. Other than that, Mayor, thank you for your comments. I know there was one more thing on the agenda, because we held off on public comments. Are we all good up here so I can see what the public comments are? To the residents, if you have a public comment, I ask that you please step to our mic, and then you can, do you want to just say what you have, and then we'll see who answers it?
Yeah.
Is that all right with you guys?
I have several things. I came to this meeting mainly because I was very irritated with the last few board meetings that were out there, with the trustees who seem to not have any memory of anything that has occurred regarding that IEPA loan. I'm a resident. I sit here at meetings. I sit and watch on the computer. I pay attention to what's going on. And one of the things that seemed to come out, and I think perhaps you're going to have to do this, is put things in a very simplistic manner. There are people who do not want to read complex details. So maybe if you put it in very simple terms, saying that this is an application process, you know, put a codicil, this is not the final thing, so that they can understand this step is absolutely needed. I mean, it was just irritating beyond words to find that stonewalling occurring again, which was very similar to the previous administration's board that stonewalled almost every single project that was attempted here. Part of the reason why many things were not done. And thank goodness Mayor Thompson came in, a new board came in that was positive, that takes a look at what's needed here in Broadview and does it. And that's a good thing. So I want to applaud everybody who's positive on this board and thinks about what their decisions are. You're not rubber stamps, I know that. You ask piercing questions when it's needed. But the problem is that the trustees who are not here are the ones who are not asking those questions, who are not paying attention and not doing what they need to do for you guys. I just want to also say a shout out to the mayor, because I was here this morning for the meeting. She had Fritz Kage here, and he was explaining things about the assessments and how some of the taxing things are done, and it was really, really interesting. It was something I wish all of you could have been here to hear these things firsthand. And thank you, Mayor Thompson, for doing these kinds of things, because I think it's very, very helpful for the village and for the community. And this was geared towards both the commercial and industrial area primarily. And it had a lot of very positive things to say, and I'm sure the mayor's going to be filling all of you in on all the details, so I'm not going to go into that because that's not what I'm here about. Regarding the tax collections, that's one of the things that I know, it takes 2 to 3 months, right, for that money to come in from the time that
Correct.
it's due. So we pay our first payment is March 1st, and our second payment's like August 1st usually. So then you have that money coming in that kind of timeline. That's hard to do because bills go on and on and on and on. They don't just come in clumps. They go on continuously, as we all know, because we're all paying bills all the time. So I do want to commend you guys for working on the grants. That's very good. One of the things that I also noticed, when you're reading off the bills that are being paid, I know that we're having a lot of water main breaks because the plumbing expenses seem to go up and up and up. And one of the things I just was wondering about, when you get bids for doing work here in town, and one of the things we need to do is replace those water mains. They're old. They're really old. They're, 80, 85, 90 years old. On people who you have experience with receiving bids for work that's been done here in the village, please, can you take a look to see, have they come in at that bid that they've bid? Have they come in under that bid? Or have they come in over with the total expenses that you've had to pay them? Because if you're getting a bid and that you're wanting to accept because it's the lowest possible bid, but if you have a history with this person actually coming out with more money than it cost you, you need to take a look at that. And that's, I think, a very important factor, and I would hope that that's one of the considerations that you take into account. I think that, I see, there was one other thing I was going to mention. Water rates. I know because I've lived in Broadview almost all my life. And I know when the water rates have not gone up and when they have gone up. And yes, as Mr. Ames mentioned, it was 6 years ago that we had a water rate increase of a very insignificant amount. Very, very small. And I remember them saying at the time that the rates had gone up at that point very much higher, but we were not taking all of that into account. There were a number of reasons why that wasn't done. A lot of other reasons that our water rates were not increased previously was, again, that stonewalling board that was in place prior to yours. So please, I'm hoping that in the future, if the Finance Committee can give stuff to the board as a whole in a more simplistic manner so that they will perhaps read it and understand it, and try to explain the things of why certain things are needed. Hopefully you can get through to them. I don't know what their plans are or why these people are acting in that manner, because I do not expect that from them, but there it is. Otherwise, thanks, guys. Good meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon, for that, those comments and those words. So we appreciate that. Next is Ms. Redmond.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't necessarily need a mic, but listen, those of you know, I go to all these meetings as well. And I do appreciate that the work that you do, and I think you are transparent in many things, but there's a couple things that I think, if you listen to a couple suggestions I have, that might make it a little easier for all of us. One of the things, when I was at the last board meeting and you were talking about the IEPA loans, I understand we need to replace the water mains. I understand for the water increase, I was at those finance meetings, and I do know that you said that you need to boost the funds so that we can get the loan. It makes sense. We're homeowners. We know that we have to have money to buy a home. We have to have money in the bank to be able to show we can pay for it. But here's my thing that I think we could do a little bit better, if you will. We've got this great state-of-the-art technology. Why not have a presentation to the residents that you're gonna be repairing water main XYZ, you're gonna be doing sidewalk 2017, whatever the maps, you know, the maps are. And this is approximate of what the money is going to be. And we're gonna have so much for engineering, and it's up there on the screen, it's a handout. It makes sense, we understand, we're all behind it. I don't mind paying more when I know exactly where the dollars, approximate dollars are gonna go. So I think that would be helpful. And also it would be helpful having the finance, a copy of what you're hearing and seeing. I'd like to be able to follow with you. And I'm sure my residents would be able to like to follow too. So give us a copy, we'd like to have that, okay? Here are my two questions that I have. Intergovernmental agreement, the $12 million bond that we took out in 2019. Did we get any payments yet from Maywood at all?
Yes, we've been paid in full.
You've been paying it, so we're
Yes.
good on that.
Yes.
Great, terrific. And then why do we operate in a deficit with the TIFs? Because I remember you were saying, Director Hicks, that we were like 48,000 lost or 23,000. Why is that? Why do we spend more than what we take in?
Because in prior years, we've already received the money. We've had surpluses. There's cash already there. The cash is just being spent in this year. The cash was earned in a prior year. So we might pay out $300,000 this year and only take in $200,000, but that's because we have significant cash already built up within that TIF.
Okay, and then lastly, we operate in a deficit for the water sewage for this, whatever, the 214,000. What's the fund balance? What do we need to be able to get a $6 million loan? Like, for example, if I'm gonna buy a house, the mortgage person is gonna tell me, the banker, you need to have this amount of money to show that you can pay for it, you know, and then you qualify for such, so what do we need?
The payments on the particular loan in question, the $6 million, is, I want to say $360,000 a year, which would account for about 30% of the increase in water fund revenue that we will have from the water rates.
Okay, and I think that's
So,
important.
and I can explain, the reason we're not going out and borrowing a huge amount of money based upon what those wires, things can happen over the 5-year implementation plan. I personally expect some of our bigger water usage people to get recycling type of machinery to cut their water usage. So we don't want to go crazy. We're taking a small amount of the projected revenue increase to get these projects started. A few years down the line, as we see how things are going, then we can look at, you know, taking another bite out of the apple, which is a big project, but we can't swallow it all at once. So we got to take a little bites at a time.
No, and I appreciate it, and I understand that, but I think it would help the general public, including myself, if you've got these presentations to make where we can see, hey, it's a third of what we're taking, you know, the examples. That would make it more palatable to everyone to understand. So I appreciate you hosting the meeting. I think overall you're doing a great job. I'm just saying communication could be a little bit better. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Can I address this?
You did what? I'm sorry.
Madam Mayor, did you want to comment on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Can I address this? Yeah. So on the July 10th water rate increase meeting, we did address the projects. We went into different financing scenario, everything. I don't know who said that, but yeah, we looked at it in many different ways. And at that time, we also talked about the past water rates. We did the same thing again in August on the presentation, on the big screen up here, on the handouts. All that information is there. In October, in the finance meeting, when we were talking about the water rates, the same information for the past 11 years, what Broadview rose, what they increased it by, what Broadview Westchester increased it by. If you kept the handouts, you've got the information. And we did bring it up, and we explained it until I was blue in the face, I thought. But apparently, some people weren't hearing this. But we can, maybe that's what we need to do, is just keep repeating and repeating and repeating these things.
I hear that you want us to have it at our village board meetings, the presentation. Let me finish, please. But our village board meetings are business meetings. So that's why we have committee meetings, so that we can get all the information out. And the other thing that we do is we stream live. So if it's something that you missed, and you can only speak for yourself, because we, the elected body, speak for the residents that voted for us. So if you go back and you look at the video from the stream finance committees, it tells you the whole history of everything that's taken place with the water increase, how it relates to the IEAP loan. Just because you want it dissect the way that you want it, our village board meetings are business meetings. That's where we conduct the village business. That's our ordinance. That's paying our bills. But to do presentations, that's why we go to committee meetings, so that we can have these type of long, lengthy conversations to get it out. The residents that's interested in the information, they watch our videos. And do you know, last year we had over 27,000 hits on our website. So I know that the information is getting out. If you take the time, and I'm not finished, please. If you take the time and you look at our village newsletter, what's articulated in our village newsletter has been every conversation that has taken place as it relates to the water increase. It talks about the IEPA loan. If you go, it says under the finance department, it breaks it down, the history and the purpose of the funding for us to do this. So because we don't articulate it the way you want it articulated, our village board meetings are business meetings. And the trustees that don't attend the finance committee meeting, you know what they have the option to do on their leisure? Go pull the tape. They know we have a finance committee meeting. I know Trustee Abraham did announce that we was having a finance committee meeting tonight. So guess what? If they're not here because they have other obligations, they can always go back and review the information. And then they can also call the finance chair, the finance director, or my office. They can call Ms. Jones, or whatever impact of department that's impacting whatever their concerns are. We have an open door policy. So it's no excuses. It's no excuses for the information not getting out, just because you represent your address. We represent the entire village, the elected body.
May I say something, please? I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Let me just say, I'm not talking about the whole presentation that you did to the finance, because I was at that meeting and I understand. What I'm saying, that when you're talking about what water mains, that the money for the $6 million that you're asking for the bonds, it wouldn't hurt to have a quick overhead that we're doing this, whatever the diagram is. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm at the meetings, and that was at the last meeting. So that's all I'm asking. That's all I'm saying. Whether you want to accept that, that's fine, but that was a suggestion that I was making, that I think it might help, and if it's out there, then I'll go check it. But I'm just saying that that's what the confusion a little bit sitting in the audience was what was going on. So
I think
thank you.
One thing to consider, Ms. Redmond, too, is that this is the application process. So as we get closer to the actual being actually awarded the loan, things could change, and I think we would come back before the board so that they would approve the actual project plan. This is preliminary to say, you know, this is the idea of what we would use the loan for, and so it wouldn't really behoove us to continuously show that this is the plan, because when we actually get the loan and get approved, things could have changed, and again, we would have to come back before the board. Matt's team and Hancock Engineering would come back before the board to have a finalized plan and timeline to say, this is exactly what's going to happen. This is what we're going to actually put in, or what we've been awarded in terms of a loan, and then what we would actually, what the course of action would be. So again, the transparency will continuously would be continuous, because we would have to come back before the board to finalize that project plan and to make sure, because that's just a part of the process.
There's a process, and that's why our village attorney's here to help clarify those questions, even from the fellow trustees that aren't here, that aren't sure of what was going on, and the things that we were putting together that was coming across in legislation, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Attorney, those were items that needed, those were steps that had to get done. Yes, we've had approvals in the past on them. We had trustees voting, and then just recently, now all of a sudden, nobody knows. I mean, it's part of a process. Everybody's available. Our department heads are available, the mayor's available, the legal team's available. So I can only speak for myself as a trustee, and I know my fellow trustees that sit with me on the finance, we talk all the time. We're going and getting the answers. I can't speak for the others, so I don't know. But, you know, we're trying to be, like you said, you've seen this finance committee for the last, year and a half now that we've been together? We've had everything laid out since when this building was under construction. We've had everybody that was a piece of something come and speak because they're the experts. I'm the trustee looking at everything as a community, you know, being a resident here like yourself. But when I have the experts sitting here, they're here for a reason.
And I
So
agree
I
with
just
you,
want
and I do, no, and I'm here, and I appreciate it. Well, I won't be laboring.
This is
but
something that never went on before.
I understand,
In prior
and I agree
administrations.
with
It
you.
started with the mayor.
I agree with you.
And she wanted to be transparency, and when she made me the finance chair, and she said transparency, and I said, I like to have a meeting once a month, and I want to make sure my team is there. I'm not saying I'm the expert. That's why you have these other individuals here. So, I mean, I'm a resident too, so I know what you're saying when you're sitting out there. I'm making sure things are being provided, information's there, you know, it's out there. We say it enough times. I mean, am I right?
No, may I say something, Madam Chair?
Sure.
The analogy that it comes to me in this process, and I'll defer to the Finance Committee, the director and the officer. It's like being on a plane at this point and then not knowing where you're going. We took off on this plane sometimes in July of 2018, and then to come back and say, well, we don't know if we're doing this or why we're doing this, we have a committee. Essentially, if you take all the weeks that were involved there, Madam Mayor, that's at least 56 different opportunities for weeks to have a different committee meeting on it, when this committee has addressed it multiple times, including a spreadsheet that shows that previous mayoral administrations did not, in fact, keep up with the water rate increases.
Absolutely.
I do represent other municipalities. Each and every one of those kept up with the water rate increases, except for one, the one that we're sitting at right now. With that in mind, you're either raising the rates to be able to fix things on a piecemeal purchase, or you go through and you have an IEPA loan and proactively take the steps to do this, much like this building is not just patchwork anymore. That being said, like I said, the way I look at it, and I defer to the Finance Committee, but because I'm the overseer essentially of the legality of the projects that go on here, is it's like getting in a plane, saying you're taking off, going halfway there, and instead of going on the East Coast, we're going on the West Coast, where I forgot where I was going. When you get in a plane at O'Hare, you set a course in a map, and this board voted with a supermajority to go on that course in that map.
Absolutely.
And then wants to retract that after 56 different weeks when they could have had meetings about it. I defer to the Finance Committee, Madam Chair, or the finance professionals, if I'm wrong in anything that I said, but.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Can I add to what he just said?
Go ahead.
Let's land the plane.
Exactly,
Play. Was there any other comments so that we can go ahead? I want to thank the individuals that I did ask to be here. Our village trustee, Mr. Vaselli, thank you for being here. Again, to the finance director, to our budget officer. I want to thank our public works director, Mr. Ames, to come to this meeting. To Ms. Letisa Jones, our village administrator, and most importantly, our mayor, who came to address this going into 2020. I think it was this was an important meeting. I needed her to address what's been happening, to give us that overview and the direction. So again, we're here all the time. We're here to help. We're here to answer any and all questions. So, and again, to the residents that are watching at home, I want to thank you guys for listening in. We're here to make sure that, as we say, be transparent. We're available. And again, thank you, everyone, and have a good night. And I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second? Thank you, thank you. Thank you for everyone coming out. Have safe travels home in this weather.